fur. I keep getting fur, grounded, connected to spirituality. Welcome back, wild ones and witches. I have a 20-part mini-series for each letter of the Ogham alphabet, and this is the ancient Irish alphabet, often associated with plants and trees and thought to have been conceived potentially by the Druids and used by them as a secret language to conceal their communication from the Romans. Now, this language is often found inscribed in ancient stones. Now, it's a vertical language that appears on a stem. It's very simple. It contains 5 lines, and these lines are usually horizontal or diagonal in the way that they bisect the stem line, and you read the language from the bottom all the way to the top. So it's a vertical language rather than a horizontal one as we would see today. Now, why were these in these ancient stones? Well, likely in that context it's not related to trees. It's probably a person's name or a family's name or a ruler's name, and it's basically a boundary marker saying this land is my land. So context is everything. Now, in the ancient Irish medieval script called the correspondances, that does document a correlation between these letters and symbols and various plants and trees. However, it's in more recent decades that books have been written which have had much more of a narrowed focus, associating the letters just with trees. But who invented this language? I think it's difficult to tell. It may well have been the Druids, the spiritual leaders, teachers, healers and advisors of the Celts, and they may have invented the language as a means of being secretive and keeping their communications quiet and concealed from the Romans. However, it may also have been the Christians, who may simply have wanted an easier way of transcribing ancient Irish into another language, avoiding transcribing into Latin. There are also mystical ideas of how this language appeared. One tells of an ancient king who travelled to the rubble of the fallen Tower of Babel, and there, after 10 years, created this selected language. So, wild ones and witches, if you love a good mystery, you're going to love Ogham. It's highly likely that it wasn't just stone that was inscribed into, but also wood. However, wood doesn't tend to stand the test of time, not unless it's buried in peat, as we see in some of the bog artefacts. So if anything was made on wood and it wasn't well preserved, it would have fallen into decay, and then that language would have been lost to time. So it's these standing stones really that do tell us that this language was used. Sometimes you can go and see these in situ, but many of them have actually been carried to museums now and are in different locations. There is a stone that's near me. I'd love to go see it, so maybe in a future episode, if you want me to, I'll travel and I'll try and go and see that stone. So I think we need to distinguish the ancient language and how it was potentially used and who devised it, and the fact that it seems to have had a broader history and was not always just associated with trees. And it may have been the Druids, but it also may not have been. You know, you can read different things. Some of the things you read will have the Druids and the Celts regularly using Ogham, and other texts it might be something slightly different. So you do have to be discerning when you're doing your own research, and I think you need to decide for yourselves. So we've got the historic aspect, but we also have the modern day meaning, and these, in a similar way to runes, these symbols are used for divination. So I've created my own little oracle deck very cheaply. So I just used some pieces of card. I got a gold pen, I drew the different plants and the trees. I used my paint. I didn't do that on all of the cards, just the ones that I wanted to pop out, and I worked intuitively, as I often do. I used some old paper and I learnt each of the symbols and the letters, and then I wrote sort of the bare bones of their meanings really onto each of the cards. And I then used a light coat of varnish over the top. It's a crafting varnish. It dried really quickly, and that will mean that I can take it out into nature, which is obviously where I normally prefer to be when it's not stormy like today. So if you want to follow along and learn some of the symbolism, I've made this 20-part series focusing on one symbol, one letter at a time. I think the longest video is 4 minutes and most of them are about 2 minutes long. As we go throughout the series, some of them do require a little bit more information, but you could easily fit this into a spare 5 minutes and a cup of tea. So if you'd like to subscribe, of course you'll be notified then of each video, but I intend to have one video going out each day for 20 days. So I'm not going to go into detail of what all of these symbols mean right here, but let's just say that you can use this in a similar way to how you work with the runes. So I'm going to show you some of the ways I use my cards in readings, and we're going to do some divination together right now. So to begin with, a very simple way of working with these cards, or with any oracle cards, is just to pull one card and see what that tells us about our energy today. So closing my eyes, I'm just going to quickly shuffle the deck. And I have the card of Blackthorn and Trials. Now, as I've been getting used to these cards, I have been getting this card quite a lot. I would liken it to receiving the Tower card in the tarot. That's quite hard to say. The Tower card in the tarot. But if you do tarot, you'll know what I mean. This is one of the darker cards. You know, do take a look at my 20-part series. Because of its association with the darker sides of magic, this plant is used sometimes in curses and also for protection. Because it does explain this card quite succinctly, so I won't go into detail here. So as I've been experimenting with these cards on my own, I have received the Blackthorn card a number of times, and this does seem to directly relate to my energy at the moment. So we could just start with this card and we could say, okay, we've pulled a card and this is a very quick one card pull, and this relates to the energy of the moment. So we could say in sort of one sentence, I'm probably going to be going through some difficult times and there's going to be a fated lesson that is meant for me to learn. That could be one way of using these cards. Another way to use them is to clarify. So I'm going to use my tarot deck. This is a tarot deck I've had for decades and it was gifted to me by my mother, who used to use it before me. So this is the Mythic tarot deck, but it's the original one. So I'm just going to pull one card from that deck and see if we can get a bit more clarity on what this card could be referring to. Okay, so just going to quickly, carefully shuffle these. These are like antiques, so I am very careful in how I handle these. I usually spread them in and choose a card, so I'll do that. If you can hear any strange noises in the background, that will of course be Ziggy. Because he does like to get comfy when I'm doing tarot. So let's just choose a card now. I'm feeling this one. And it's the Queen of Wands. Funnily enough, I was expecting the Queen of Pentacles, or at least a Queen, either Pentacles or Wands. So that was what was in my mind's eye, which is quite interesting. So what I feel with this is telling me that although there are trials and lessons, like I feel like it's almost like a lesson, you know, a trial by fire. That's basically one way to put it with the wands there. So it's almost like, right, in life you've got different stages and you can choose to walk the simple path, or you can choose the thorny path, the one that in the fairy tales, you know, the handsome prince has to rescue the princess and cut through all those spiny vines, and then, you know, his goal is at the end of that pathway. Now, you know, I find fairy tales on one hand romantic and on the other hand, you know, fairly sort of disempowering to women. So I'm just using that as an analogy. But basically, in this case, this could be saying that, you know, you're going on the path that's less travelled. There's going to be many more obstacles, because something that's actually worth your time, be it a person, a project, a dream, it's not usually instantaneous. You know, there are often like the hero's journey, there are challenges to overcome, there are hurdles, there are difficulties. You can't just have it on a silver platter, you know, you've got to earn it. So it's saying that there's a stage in my life where to pursue something, and this is like a leadership card, will take confidence and courage, and I think that's why the lion's appearing. And so the courage and the sort of Leo energy of this card is what is necessary to counter and complement this card, which is the energy of the difficult time, the trials in my life, the fated test, as it were. So this is just one way that you could quite quickly use these cards, or any other oracle cards as well. But if you do make these cards, I just wanted you to know how you could potentially incorporate them into your practice. We're going to do another example now, which is going to be more of a timeline version, which is a past, present and future. Now, I have terrible directional abilities. When things are in mirror image and left and right, I get ever so confused. So I'm going to do the past, present, future in this direction, and then I'll turn it round for you so that it sits in the right order. So first of all, shuffling the energy. Some people knock the energy out. I'm asking for past, a card to reflect the past energy influencing my situation. Now, you might want to ask a specific question, but I don't tend to work that way. I just allow the energy of the moment. I sort of assume that my guides, spirit, already know kind of where I'm at, and I don't choose to be that directive, but a lot of people do. So, you know, you just find your own way, whatever works for you. Go with your gut instinct. So past. So in my past energy, I've got the you. I'll turn this round for you in a moment. My present energy, what's relevant right now in relation to this past energy of you. The oak, so strength. And my future, so where am I taking this? Oops. Ivy. So let me just spin this round for you now. Past, present, and future. So it's saying that, you know, in the past energy, and I'm getting a sense of recent energy, so say in the last 1 to 3 months, it's suggesting that there has been an ending of some kind, and that ending was necessary in order for new shoots to grow, in a similar way that when the trunk of the yew is cut, it is still possible for that tree to grow something new. So I think this is about an ending. One could say it's similar to the Death card in the tarot, or perhaps to the Ten of Swords in the tarot. That's what I'm sensing today. Now, on other days, you might read a different facet of that theme, but that's what I'm getting today. So that's the past energy affecting the present moment, and the present moment is suggesting that right now I'm either needing or embodying a lot of strength. And I think that, you know, correlates with the idea of the blackthorn, which funnily enough is just on the bottom of the deck as I've turned it over. It's right there. So, you know, I think this is quite synchronistic. You know, when we go back to these two together, it's suggesting the same thing I was just talking about. It's saying, you know, courage, strength is necessary right now. And then it's saying that, you know, the point, or the line of direction, like where you're headed, is something transformative. And like the ivy, this is like a process of change where I'm heading towards some twists and turns and heading upwards on something, transforming a part of my life. Now, this does make sense to me. This is social media. I do have some boundaries. There's a limit to what I'm going to share. But you know, suffice to say, this does make sense to me. And, you know, if you were making your own little deck and doing this yourself, or using oracle cards that you already have, then, you know, you would obviously apply this to your own situation. I do feel that this is a good tool for people who overthink, you know, because it helps you to tap into that more intuitive aspect. I would also err on the side of caution that, you know, if you're anxious or nervous, or you don't want to receive a card like the Death card in the tarot or the U card, then, you know, doing these sorts of practices is probably not for you. You know, I would never want to tell you what to do or what not to do, but my advice would be that psychologically it might not be healthy. And the same when we're thinking about giving readings to people. You know, some people might be considered vulnerable. At some point in our lives, we're all vulnerable. But some people may be in stages of life where they're more vulnerable than others. And I do think we have a responsibility to consider what the psychological impacts of using these kinds of tools could be on other people. So, you know, just sort of a word of caution really on that, because there's a responsibility as a tarot reader or an oracle reader when giving that information, but there is also a responsibility when receiving it. This is how you could do a 3-card pull. I'm now going to show you how you could incorporate this with runes, and that's a bit of a different style of using these kinds of cards. So this is my rune bag. They're black jasper runes, and I used them for a number of years now, and I have a real sort of affinity with them. So I think one of the things that's important is building an energetic connection with the tools that you're using. So these feel very much like my runes. I could use a new set of runes, I could use somebody else's runes, but you know, when I said that out loud, or using someone else's runes, I felt uncomfortable, like I'm betraying my runes. So make of that what you will. But in a similar way to using the runes, I want to scatter these cards, and I'm interested in the directions as to how they fall. So I'm going to just shuffle them, and then I'm going to split them, and I'm going to shuffle them in different directions so that they're already kind of jumbled up in the same way that the runes will be in the bag. And this is so that I can see what is, you know, on its side or reversed, or merkstave, as we might say when we are doing the runes. So just bear with me whilst I prepare. So I have prepared my cards just by jumbling them up. I'm now going to jumble up my runes as well. And one of the reasons I'm doing this is I believe it breaks up the energy. Okay, so both of my divination tools are now ready. What I'm going to do is I'm going to look at it from my direction towards the camera, and then what I'll do is when I'm editing, I'm going to flip this round so that you can see it from my perspective. And that's because I need to be able to read everything in relation to each other and where we might have reversals. So first of all, I'm going to start with the cards. And I'm basically just quickly going to shuffle, and I'm going to throw some of them, and we're going to see how they land. And I'm just going to let it do it in a very haphazard manner. Okay, so this is where we want to carefully remove the ones that aren't part of the reading. And for me, it's these where the deck is still together. I'm going to leave those as they are. I don't want to move them into a line. I want them to be where they were. I'm going to leave all of these just as they are. I do think that we've got a few underneath here that aren't, that one isn't relevant. It felt like it was just attached to this. But the others have separated themselves, and they appear like they want to be read, like they're being quite obvious. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to start just contemplating the cards before I bring in the runes. So towards me and the center of this reading, we've got broom, and this is suggesting, as it's upright, that at the moment I'm needing to kind of clear up something, you know, and thinking about the last card with the energy of the ending, you know, there's something that's kind of toppled over, something that's been chaotic, something that's like a whirlwind, suddenly changed direction, or an ending, something like that. And that I am needing to kind of put things back into order and use that energy and direct the energy one way or another. And because it's upright, I feel it's suggesting that, you know, I am doing that. You know, that's a strength at the moment. It's also touching the oak card of strength. Now that's appearing kind of reversed. It's sort of on its side. I don't feel it's suggesting that I don't have strength. I think it's suggesting that it's fluctuating and that it's taking a lot of energy, and it's suggesting that it is going to take a lot of strength. And I feel it's an inward strength that it's referring to rather than a physical kind, although of course the two are always interlinked. As we move upwards in the reading, we have the card of Aspen, and this is reversed. And I think that, you know, Aspen, we've said on the card, relates to transformation and fear, but as you'll see in the mini-series, one of the characteristics of Aspen is that it's never on its own. And I feel like this is indicating that at the moment, this is an isolated issue. This is something that I am either needing to, or I'm either needing to deal with it on my own, or it would be beneficial to share the problem with other people. That's the sense that I'm getting. So moving over to this part of the reading, and you'll see that where things land, sometimes they sort of lead you into different aspects of the same issue, or perhaps different areas of life. So to me, this is one area here. I tend to work from closest to me radiating outwards, or in the center radiating outwards as being sort of the main focus. And also the cards that have landed on top. So here we have the Willow card. This is basically upright. It's at a slight tilt, but it's basically upright from my position. And this is suggesting there is a very feminine, intuitive aspect. Now, of course, this could relate to, you know, feminine cycles, hormones, etc., stages of life. It could also be related to something more in the vein of the High Priestess tarot card or the Moon tarot card. You know, feminine energy that's shifting. It's more elusive. It's about receptive energy. It's about messages and psychic abilities coming in, dreams, that side of things, the subconscious. So let's see what else we have under this card. Under it directly, we have Holly, which also appears to be basically upright. I'm just going to remove these carefully. So this is how they are appearing, like this. Hopefully you haven't got too much reflection. I feel like they're almost hand in hand, and this is suggesting balance. So I actually do think this is related to hormones, honestly. I don't mind sharing with you. I think this is sort of suggesting that there's, you know, a balance that needs to be struck at the moment into feminine related issues for me personally. That's what I'm feeling. I'm happy to share that. I'm going to put that down very carefully, so I want to sort of put it back in a moment. Under that, we've also got a new project, Fir Tree Grounded, kind of on its side. I don't feel like it's reversed, but it's like it's not happening right now. It's almost blocked. And then we have underneath that Elder, which is basically reversed. And this is about letting go. It relates to change. It relates to health. So what I'm feeling here is that there is the potential for something new, a new project to come in, but it hasn't started yet. And that there's a hiatus. The change is kind of on a hiatus. There's still something else that needs to be cleared, an energy that needs to be cleared in the past. So just carefully trying to put that back as you know, similarly as I can as to how it fell. And then we have this little group over here. So I do see this in 3 different sections. I think there are 3 different aspects to this card and rune cast. On the top, we've got Rowan. So this is, to me, a very positive card. I love the Rowan tree. I have a real affinity with that tree. I almost feel the way about a Rowan tree as I do when I see a robin. If you watch my series, you'll know that I just adore robins, and I do feel very connected to robins and the energy of robins. So I am thinking about robins when I see this card. Maybe it's the red, I don't know, but I think I do feel like it's basically upright, and this is indicating I think fruitfulness and protection. You know, rowan trees were often planted outside the front of people's homes because they were indicative of protection. So I feel like that's the main message here. Underneath it directly, we've got Heather, which is reversed. And so this is more of a healing, romance and other worlds card. It's a bit mysterious, but I feel that there's a level of, it's about connections, whether those be in relationships and friendships, or whether they be the connection to other worlds, other realms, or within oneself. So there's something about that that's in reverse under here. So if this is more of a psychic aspect, this could be saying that at the moment I'm being quite protected, and perhaps there is some kind of slight, maybe it's softer, maybe there's a softer energy. I'm not, you know, for example, I have in the past seen what I would say are spirits and things. I'm not seeing any of that right now. It's not the door is closed, but it's a gentler kind of energy at the moment. And then directly under those we have the birch tree, which is upright, and this is, you know, very synonymous with Imbolc, I would say, because it's about birth, new energy. I've been really connected to a birch tree that's in my garden at the moment. You know, I've lived here for many years, but it's really over the last month that I've noticed this tree in a different way, and I feel like it's almost calling and connecting to me, and I feel like it's the energy of new projects, which we also have appearing here. So I think there's something about this hiatus, about this protective period. I feel like this Heather card is almost talking about a little shield being around me, protecting me. And, you know, of course, the aspen tree was known as the shield tree. So I just think that that's something for me to consider. And underneath it all, sort of the energy that's coming through is almost in my head, I'm seeing a shoot, like, you know, a little green shoot pushing up through the earth, and it needs to be protected as it develops, and it's moving from one realm inside the ground to another, but it's not quite here yet. And underneath it we have my card of the moment, it appears, which is the Blackthorn, Fate and Trials, but it's this time it's reversed. So I feel like it's coming out of these fated trials is this new little shoot that's currently sort of being protected by spirit. And I almost think about like the Ace of Pentacles. If you do your tarot, you know, something that's being manifested and is being brought to you, that's the energy that I pick up on there. So now let's do a bit of clarification with the runes. I'm just going to put my hand in the bag, have a little shuffle. I've got quite small hands. I'll sort of grab a bunch and then I'll just sort of throw them down and I'll see where they land. Interesting how it's separated into three. Do you see that? So there's synchronicity there between these three areas of life. And you saw that how I basically just threw. They could have landed over here or there, but they've chosen these three different areas. How interesting. We've got Tyr, the rune of Tyr here. And this is usually related to justice, things balancing out. Can be also related to more like masculine energy as well. So the rune Tyr or Tyrwas is quite, when it's upright like this, it's quite a strong energy, and it has landed on the oak card, symbolizing strength. So, you know, I can feel the energy and I can't describe it to you. When we turn runes, we turn them like a page. So when they land upside down, we turn them like a page. Okay, so here we have the rune of Feu. It's not really reversed, but it's not upright. You know, some people will read them when they land sideways as being reversed. I don't. I kind of see them as being in between. I think that's why they're landing like that. So we've got kind of Feu, which is symbolic of things like abundance. I think of a squirrel when I think of Feu, you know, harvesting all the nuts and, you know, having all of that stuff in preparation and, you know, accumulating things like money, you know, or profit, things going well. It could be an abundance of food, you know, it's generally like a material energy, and also health as well. But generally it's sort of like, you know, your career's going really well, money's coming in, or it's just about to, that kind of thing. Savings are really good. So here we've got it kind of on its side. It's saying, it's not terrible, it's not going great, but it's sort of landed next to this chaos. So it's suggesting that this chaos is in some way related to probably like a work-based energy, or a monetary energy, or an agricultural energy. You know, if I was a farmer, my ancestors were farmers, you know, and I'm tending the fields and I'm trying to grow something very physical and manifest it, and that abundance ultimately will be sold, and that's where my money would come from, is saying, yeah, you know, it's not terrible, it's not really growing, it's right in the middle. It's like the Seven of Pentacles tarot card, if you know your tarot. And it's connected to this chaos. So it's basically suggesting, I feel, that, you know, this chaos needs to be worked through to sort of bring that into an upright position. That's when things will start to balance out again as well, and that it will incorporate strength to do that. Strength of character, strength of, you know, moral foundations. This is about like a strong foundation. Justice can also be connected obviously with legal things. That does make sense to me because part of my skill set is actually related to law. So let's take a look at this one over here that's landed very snuggly by Rowan Protection. So turning it like a page, and it is Awaz. So it's the rune of the horse. It's the rune of teamwork. A lovely rune actually, and it's upright. And I often think of this as almost like two people holding hands. You know, it's the rune of partnership in a way, but different to Gabo, which is the rune of the X, where that's also can be about exchange and partnership. This is like a different feeling. It's more like the rune of teamwork. And so there's a joining together energy here, which is connected to this protected seed. So I feel like there's maybe a partnership in my future of some kind that's not yet kind of come into being. It's gestating, as another way that we might see it. Now, obviously, these are very nature-based. Even the runes are very connected to nature. And so when reading it is helpful, I think, to kind of think about this in alignment with how they would have been read at the time that they were made. You know, there was a heavy sort of agricultural element to things. There was a very nature-based way of looking at things. The weather would have had a huge impact. So it's important to understand what, you know, say a hailstorm thousands of years ago and a big storm, the difference between what that would mean and what winter could mean, for example, as to how that would appear today. You know, now we have things like meteorological readings. You know, you can turn on the TV and see what the weather's going to be like today, or look on your phone and you can see what the weather will be like. But they didn't have that ability then. You know, they had to use more natural ways to predict the weather. And if they got that wrong, or, you know, if they weren't able to make plans quickly enough, it could have a devastating impact. So I think it's important to understand the history of these symbols as far as we possibly can, because it does still incorporate and lend us information into our readings today in sort of the modern day. Another thing that I think is important to think about in relation to these symbols of the Ogham or the Ogham and the runes is that there's potentially a relationship between these. I noticed that, you know, I already know the runes pretty well. The Ogham was newer to me, but as I was learning them, I saw, for example, you know, with the yew tree, it reminded me of another rune which is also related to the yew tree, which is also about death and rebirth. And I thought, wow, you know, there's a real connection here between these symbols. But, you know, the Ogham was probably originally written on wood, and that wood would have been lost, you know, to time. So it's only really the stone inscriptions that we still have to go by, which would obviously have been later relics. We don't really know which came before the other. It's a bit chicken and egg. I read some things that suggested that Ogham came first, and it was on wood and it came first. And then I've also read that there appears to be indications that the runes, or the knowledge of the runes, came over from the Germanic people to the Irish in some way, and from that the Ogham was produced. So it is difficult to say, but there is some kind of energy of relationship, I feel, between the symbols. And so I do feel that they complement each other rather well. And they are, as I say, all nature-based. So I hope you found this interesting and useful. If you do like nature-based practices, then I think that this might be something for you to explore further and maybe to consider using in your practice. As always, thank you for watching. Thank you for supporting my channel. I am on Patreon now. I'm also making my way over to TikTok. I'm trying to make a few more shorts for you as well. I'm trying to be more mindful of the length of time of some of my films. So I know that, you know, as much as I like to be creative, I need to rein it in a bit, because I know you don't all have lots of time to be able to watch it all the way through. So if you'd like to continue to support me, I really appreciate it. Please do like this video if you enjoyed it and found it interesting. Please do consider subscribing to my channel and ticking the bell so that you know about future videos. And, you know, wildest wishes to you wherever you are. And I hope that you've stayed safe in the storms we've had in the UK and also in the US. And I'll see you next week, as next week's episode is also going to be about divination, but I'm going to be talking a bit more about the tarot in that episode, which is one of the tools that I've done for the longest. It's probably the divination tool that I feel the most comfortable with, and I thought it might be interesting to sort of share a little bit and maybe do a bit of like a tarot lesson. So I'm not sure how much experience you've already had to date. Probably it's fluctuating, with some people that will know more and others who won't be as experienced, but hopefully there'll be something for all of you in that episode and that you'll enjoy it. So I'll see you soon.